Hey, all, as we jump into this podcast, just a quick little note. We had some technical difficulties with this one, and so a microphone has some distortion. Hopefully it's not too irritating as you listen. We really enjoyed this movie and hope you enjoy the podcast even with the distorted sound. Thanks for listening.
Hey, 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 hey.
Dear Mr. or Mrs. Listener, we accept the fact that you're going to sacrifice a whole hour to listen to this podcast, but we think you are crazy. In the simplest terms, you see us as you want to see us. A Ninja Turtle, a Jedi, a redhead, a mic. Sincerely yours, Redhead Family Therapy Guy, and a mic.
Don't you forget about the bugger. So walk on by. You better listen to this thing. It's gonna be great.
All right, here we are, back for another podcast.
Woo!
Yes, you're with the Redhead Family Therapy Guy, and
A mic.
I'm John,
I'm Michael.
and we're so glad that you're joining us for just a wonderful discussion about movies, mental health, and awesomeness.
Yes, thank you.
Dude, this movie that we're talking about today, The Last Starfighter, I can't tell you how much it brought out like the 7-year-old boy in me. Like it took me back because I remember I watched this movie as a kid a bunch. And one of the reasons why is I took a trip to Texas. I don't remember. It was somewhere like in my 8th year, or 9th year, or 10th year, somewhere around there. And it was kind of boring because we were at my grandparents a lot. I had lots of cousins in that, but for whatever reason, I remember being bored a lot and at my grandma's house. And they had HBO. And back in the day when a movie would be like the movie on HBO, they would play it a lot, like 3 times a day. You know?
Yeah. Well, because it wasn't on demand, right? You had to wait for it to come around.
Right. And so I watched this movie like 6 times or something like in that week.
That's awesome.
They had like HBO in the back room TV, and there was like nothing to do. My brother wouldn't like play with me or anything. And so, because he was 5 years older. And so I just watched this movie like a ton of times because I thought it was so awesome.
It is very nostalgic. I think for me, the arcade machine, right? The game, just being kind of outside at this like store is very nostalgic to me, because when we were kids, pretty much any place you would go would have at least some type of arcade game.
Do you remember the tabletop ladybug centipede?
I do.
Like at pizza places, you have like your slice of pizza and be playing centipede.
Yeah.
Like as the thing was coming down, I thought that was the coolest. I actually really liked pinball machines too.
Yeah. There was usually always a pinball machine, right? Wherever you went, I feel like there was a pinball machine. And then if you were lucky, there was like a game that, like pinball's a game, but what am I talking about? Like an arcade game or something like The Last Starfighter. And so that was very nostalgic to me. And it kind of, the other movie that I loved as a kid was The Wizard. Do you remember that? That was about video games also. And so that kind of reminded me, it has Fred Savage in it. And it has the boy, I think the little boy that is the wizard, I think is the kid from Hook and the kid from What About Bob?
Yeah.
If I remember right, man, this one we need like Heidi on to be our pop culture consultant. But it's very nostalgic. That kind of whole, and I don't know why, but the whole trailer park setting for me,
the nicest
out in the desert is very nostalgic. And maybe because I grew up in Vegas in the desert, but that setting was very nostalgic to me too, just in the movie. It just kind of reminded me of being a kid.
So yeah, the thing about the trailer park thing too is it's like that's like the nicest trailer park I've ever seen in my life. It was like, so it just like it was like all friendly, and they're like this neighborhood with like the store or whatever. But yeah, it
was kind of a cool thing that they did with this movie, right? Where they did this neighborhood, like, because all movies always seem to take place in neighborhoods, right? Especially, I feel like a lot of nostalgic movies from that time period. There's like a neighborhood setting, and they all kind of they're
like the movie Rad.
Yeah, like
that was a real neighborhood movie.
And so this one was a trailer park neighborhood. but yeah, it was nostalgic. And the other thing that I kind of got, like it kind of reminded me of, was loosely kind of like an Ender's Game. Did you think that at all? And I can explain it.
No, it didn't. I mean, I think I could see where that would hit you, but that did not come to my mind when I was watching it now.
Yeah, I had a little bit of an Ender's Game feel to it, just because he's training, right? He's basically training on this video game system, which is really a cool idea, right? And that's kind of a little bit of a feel of like Ender's Game, right? Where they're training without knowing that they're training, or they're actually I guess that's more so they're actually battling without knowing they're battling.
Yeah.
But I felt that it kind of had a little bit of that flair to it for me.
Well,
which was cool.
It also takes him off world.
Yes.
He returns. And that really, for me, the part that really connected, I think, with my inner boy was, I don't know if there's another movie out there like this, where at the end of the movie, he like leaves Earth.
I know.
He like comes back to get his girl, and he's like, hey, I'm the last Starfighter, and we gotta like develop a new like platoon and new like Starfighter force. So I need to be off world. You want to come? You know?
Yeah, and he's just like, "See you later, mom. See you later, brother." It's like, bye. I thought it was crazy too. I remember thinking as a kid, like, holy cow, he's just like leaving. But I guess he can come back whenever he wants, right?
Yeah, I mean,
like no biggie.
Yeah, no biggie. There's no they didn't deal with time travel or anything like that, or like space time slowing down as you speed up or get away or whatever. But like it doesn't. I mean, it was just cool. Like I'm just like, that's cool. And then I think that's the theme that hit me for the movie too. Yeah. It's like the theme of like this notion of identity, a little bit kind of the Karate Kid podcast, but this notion of like meaning, right? Because it's like, he's this smart kid, and it's interesting how different, like, I guess the 80s were with college, because he's like, you don't have money, and I'm like, that doesn't exist. Like, anybody can get money to go to college. Like, it's just interesting. It's like, oh, you can't get money to go to college. Like, your loan got denied. It's like they were denying loans for college in the 80s, like for guys like going.
Yeah, you had to go private. I wonder when FAFSA actually was engaged. You know,
because it was like MIT or something too. It was like a legit college. Like if he got accepted to that college, he probably should get the funding to go to like college.
I would think so.
You know, and so it's just kind of funny that was like a thing or whatever of like, because I remember there's a lot of movies like that. There was another, maybe it was Vision Quest, like we were talking about doing it, and I watched it, and it was like the same scenario. It was like he wanted to go to college, and like he was like this poor kid, and like that was a barrier, you know.
Well, and I think that's a common issue just in movies in general. Never do they mention, oh, you can just apply for federal aid or you can just apply for grants at the school or scholarships at the school, or
right.
A lot of those Ivy League schools will give full ride depending on income, right? So if you're not making enough, then you can go for free.
MIT or Harvard had the money, you know. I'm sure they did for a hopeful,
but that
coming from a trailer park.
You need something in the movie, right? And so I think that's why we see that a lot in movies.
It's like an obvious one they could go to in the 80s. It was like it worked.
Yes.
But yeah, so that whole thing was a big part of this movie for me, was this notion of purpose and meaning, right? Because that's really what this, you know, the main character's journey. Why am I forgetting his name? Do you remember his name? I'm forgetting his name.
Oh yeah, I can't remember.
That's bad.
Kyle or Reese
Brad.
Or Jason, Fred.
Some very
the Last Starfighter, we'll call him.
But yeah, just that notion of like, you know, I mean, he's this he's this kind kid, like doing like service around the trailer park for folks. Like he skips out on the lake day to like do work around the trailer park or whatever. I guess because his mom must be like the manager or something like that. And it's just a really like iconic idea of who am I, where is my purpose and meaning, and then just this fantastical, like crazy, you know, scenario where this guy shows up from outer space. Like, well, you broke the record on the video game, so you know.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And to even take that a step further, not only does this opportunity open up, but he becomes like the last hope. Right. So it's like he is the one. He's the Neo
right.
of this universe. Yes, the Luke of this universe, which is really, you know, I mean, really interesting theme that kind of plays throughout the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really enjoyed one of the things I remember as a kid that really struck me of how cool it was is like the device that allows you to hear everything in your language.
Yes.
I remember being like, that's so cool. You could talk to anybody. Like, what an amazing, and that whole, like, all of the ensemble of, like, characters or whatever. I'm forgetting in the movie why he comes back. Why does he come back?
He comes back to Earth because he feels, oh man, it's something like he feels, well, he's upset because, what's the guy's name? It's like a star system or Centauri.
Yeah, that's the guy that developed.
Because he kind of like tricks him into going, and he's like, dude, this is real. Like, I don't want to do this. I think he's kind of a sense of this is dangerous. This is scary.
Well, and
I didn't sign up for this. Yeah.
I'm inadequate. I can't do this.
And so he kind of like gives up almost, right?
Does he just surrender? Like, he's like, I'm not this, and he just leaves. Is that what it is? And then they all get killed, right?
He makes Centauri, and then his friend, the alien dude, goes to Centauri and says, like, he doesn't want to be here. He can't be a starfighter if he doesn't want to be here. And so then Centauri's like trying to kind of coax him into it, right? He's like a salesman, right? He's trying to get him into it.
It's a really interesting that he's like this like recruit.
Yeah.
He's totally like a basketball coach.
Yeah, he is. Well, it's interesting. He sees something in him in the Last Starfighter that the Last Starfighter doesn't see in himself, right? Which is kind of the idea, right? Is he's this smart kid that just doesn't feel like he maybe deserves more. And I think that's a really interesting point. I don't know that this is the point they intended to make, the filmmakers, but he leaves and almost it's like the sense of he just gives up, right? He gives up, he leaves and goes back home. And you would think, well, he failed. That's bad. There's going to be a consequence for that, right? And the consequence of him doing that is he is still alive.
Right.
It's actually a blessing. Like, it's this miracle that he's still alive, and he happens to be trained because he's been training for however long on this video game, and he's able to go back, and he's the last starfighter. And I wonder, so the point, I think, to me, or how I interpreted that, is how often in my life do I have situations that happen where I feel like I failed, and now I'm worse off. Yeah, it's a bad situation. Yes. But maybe it's not.
Right.
Maybe it's something, maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe it's a way to move forward and to grow. And maybe it's a blessing. Maybe it's a miracle in my life. And how often do we view those things as something that just is a cloud that hangs over us, a weight and a burden that we carry on our shoulders?
Tragedy, a trauma. Yeah. Which, let's not minimize those kinds of things that happen in our life.
No, of course.
Traumatic and difficult and horrible. But I think that it is a great reframe on what a tragedy can be, and come on, like, and that's the thing too, is it's like, I don't think there are too many humans, regardless if they come from a really, blessed, let's say, 1% starting line. I mean, every life is a life that has tragedy and difficulty.
Definitely.
And there's
it's the eye of the beholder, right?
Right.
I mean, something that's traumatic is traumatic because it's traumatic to me.
Right.
It doesn't have to be traumatic to someone else to be just as traumatic as any other thing. It's traumatic to me. And I think that's hard for us to understand sometimes, for ourselves and even for others.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because there's so much. I mean, for any person to say, well, that person has it easier. It's like, yeah, but do you know if that person was horribly abused every single day by their parent? Like, you just see this person that comes from wealth or has talent, has capability, has beauty, has brilliance. And it's like, yeah, but maybe that person was literally abused every day. Like, you have no idea. And it's like,
and the thing, also that I think about is it's different, so let's say someone who maybe has things provided for them constantly. And all of a sudden at the age of 15, that's taken from them. And they have to do maybe what I have to do now, And I may view that as, well, that's just like what you're doing isn't hard. But for that person, from their framework, that's traumatizing.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe nothing, like maybe in the sense of like what we might perceive normally as trauma, like an abuse or a sexual assault or death, warfare. Maybe that's, not what happened. Maybe it's literally there was just a loss of what they've always had as far as comfort. And now they're brought down to what most of us have to do in life. And that's traumatic to them. And so I think that's the thing, right? Is trauma is very subjective, and it's the eye of the beholder.
Completely is, which is why it's so important to not, have these ideas where it's like, who's the greatest victim? It's really, I think, a really unhealthy ideology and a really unhealthy way to approach.
Great point.
Well, and just that comparison, to envy and think somebody else has it better, or to think you're better because of opportunities as well. It's like, some of the most remarkable people have come from some of the most marginalized experiences. And if they don't have those marginalized experiences, which I don't want anybody to have to go through, but it gives them an appetite, it gives them a resolve that other maybe experiences would not have lent themselves to. You know what I mean? So so it's a great point to make, and a great thing to see, that his discouragement, his feeling not ready, really left him in this place to be the last starfighter.
Yeah, it was a miracle for a miracle of an opportunity for him to really grow into his own and gain confidence in himself, but also a miracle to all of us, right? Because he's able to really kind of save everyone.
The universe. The universe.
Back in the 80s, so we didn't even know it.
I remember as a kid the AI that like shakes his hand and like metamorphosizes in the bed. I remember being absolutely freaked out by the grossness of like his half-formed
when he's under the blanket and like shows his face.
The mom touches him and is like, get up or something, and he's all like half goo or whatever. I was like, ah! I remember being absolutely terrified.
I remember that too. I remember thinking, oh, that's so weird. And then
so gross.
And the other funny thing with kind of those scenes when the AI is there, I think, is when the younger brother is just looking through Playboys. And then we find out later it's his collection. And I'm just thinking, man, this
it's like 11.
Little kid.
Yeah, I thought that too. I was like, oh, I remember as a kid thinking that was really funny. And maybe even like I
do too. Yeah, I didn't think second of it.
I had peers that totally had Playboy magazines as well at that like 11-year-old age. I remember thinking nothing of that. That was,
well, now we come to like our day and age, and it's such a sad thing because his age, it's like, oh, all he's looking at is Playboy. I mean, I have clients that are 7, 8, and they're viewing pornography, like hardcore pornography.
Yeah, not artsy.
No,
Playboy.
Yeah,
like,
however you define Playboy.
Well, I mean, they tried to be a little bit, I think, artsy,
higher end, if you want to call it. Yeah,
like definitely a little bit more than kind of punchy, just grossness, right?
But it's crazy just to see in that. We're talking what 30-ish, 40, less than 40 years to go from that to it's even a younger demographic now
to
that are exposed.
Whatever your brain can come up with. That's bizarre and just absolutely horrific.
Not really a topic we need to get into, but I just thought it was really interesting part of the movie that jumped out to me. I was like, oh wow, and it kind of gave me a pause to think for a second about what I experience as a therapist with clients and how young they are now.
Well, and just that's a common theme in 80s movies. Of
it is sexuality,
funny, boyish. Like, there isn't. I don't know if there's an equivalent of that that's made lighthearted. And movies aren't. It's funny. Like, I don't think movies tend to be as silly as 80s movies, right? Like, it's like sci-fi movies tend to be more kind of serious or trying to play on the real. Versus Last Starfighter was like or Goonies, or like some of these were just kind of buffoonish, and that was like great.
Yeah.
That there isn't movies made quite like that now. I wonder if it's like
Yeah.
the equation of making a movie is too expensive, that I remember reading an article somewhere about that there was like this investment in movies, and the idea of, either you go all in, like, and spend $300 million to try to make, $100 billion,
Sure.
or like, you can't make buffoonish cheap movies, because it's like, well, can we get our money back? Or they have this equation of they have to make so much more money than they spend. And so there's this whole genre of movies that I guess are being made on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime now, that are these kind of in between, but they don't come into the theaters. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really an interesting thing. And from what I've seen is, the budget of a movie to break even really needs to be doubled after you cover all advertising and whatever costs they have. And so you think about that, like a movie that costs 250 million needs to make 500 million to break even is amazing. I mean, that's just mind boggling to me. Excuse me. So I thought it was interesting too. So we have this situation where he like gives up, right? I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but he has a question, and he comes back, ends up getting back there, and he's still not sure, right? He's still like, I'm upset that I'm here, / I'm worried about being here, / I feel inadequate.
Yeah.
It doesn't just go away. And I think that's an interesting point for us in our lives, is that, we can commit to something, but we still may not feel secure in it. And that doesn't mean that we're not the person for that thing.
Right.
As for example, with him, he was the person. I mean, he was the only option, but he was the person. He was able to do what needed to be done.
Yeah.
But it took a while.
The spinning out of control behind the back lines move. Did they have the ability to stay stationary, or were they spinning around like with their
I don't remember with that part, because they started spinning. I wasn't sure if it was to like just so that he could shoot, or if it, I don't remember that part.
That's like a puke fest, man. Like if you're spinning in every direction 360, like you're going to be spewing some.
If there's gravity, right? I'm assuming.
Well,
it seemed like there was gravity in the ship. Oh, I guess the spinning could create gravity too.
I know. Yeah, like you're in the middle of outer space, spinning in every direction. Like I'm sorry, dude. That's going to mess with your capabilities, your physical capabilities, man. That's like, what are those guys that trained for the first moon stuff?
Yeah, Apollo.
Yeah, the Right Stuff movie.
Oh, the Right Stuff movie. Mm-hmm.
They put them under
All the Right Stuff, I think, is
all
what
the right stuff. Yeah, they put them
the title
under
is.
all the duress, all the different G's, and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah,
we didn't even have to go through that,
which is so funny to me, because I remember watching All the Right Stuff. This is a little side tangent, and thinking, he didn't have to go through any of that, or even thinking of like Big Bang Theory when Howard goes to the International Space Station, and they kind of show him training and stuff, but I'm like, he probably didn't have to do, he's a scientist, right? He didn't have to do everything that the astronauts had to do.
So I got to throw in a couple things that I absolutely love too, that were more on the nostalgic side. Like I absolutely love the opening credit, like music, like
the music,
dude, the 80s music background, because sometimes you'll watch like a 90s movie and you'll be super conscious of their like background music, and you're like, yeesh, this is definitely dated. But I love like the 80s background music.
So it's interesting, because it's like right around the late 90s, early 2000s, I feel like movies started to have like covers a lot of times.
That was definitely a 90s thing. That was definitely in the 90s.
And that's not as, because covers can be fine, but oftentimes they change it to where it's not as good. And Heather and I were watching a movie that came out in 2000. I can't remember what the movie is right now, but we were watching it the other day, and it was a cover of the song, and it was just a horrible cover. And that was their intro song. And I was like, they should have just used the original song. It would have sounded. And I think that's the difference between that and in the 80s is oftentimes it's original songs. And they
yeah.
still do that today, but I feel like in the late 90s, early 2000s, I feel like a lot of those movies have covers to popular songs that they have. And I think that
or some just
takes away
like
from it.
some of them just threw in popular songs. You know,
Yeah.
like there's a bunch of movies that just threw in, which I always I thought was cool. I always think it's cool when they pull in like a current song. Like
Yeah.
no, that's an interesting like how things were done differently, or how different eras of movies have different things. One of the other things that I remember as a kid being absolutely blown away was by the graphics of the movie, like the video game graphics, and then like the stuff that you see that is like computer generated or whatever. I remember thinking it was like the coolest thing ever.
Well, because it is computer generated. Where you think about like episode 4, right? So Star Wars, it's you know, there's more, it's models, right? Like there's a lot more models being used, where this movie, I feel like, oh wow, they're using a lot of computer graphics to create these scenes. And I think that's right around, I feel like, if I remember right, like Tron, I feel like had a lot more of like that computer graphic in it.
They were probably experimenting with flexing.
And it reminded me, that was nostalgic for me too, kind of seeing those computer graphics and thinking, oh, I remember how that was like legit, man.
Like
that was crazy. Yeah.
Like, oh, those computer graphics. You know, now it's actually, I think it's cooler when they do more concrete stuff. You know what I mean? I think like watching Star Wars, you know, especially if you watched before, you know, Lucas redid them and added a bunch of stuff in. I'm like, dude, that's so. It's interesting. I think great movies really do a lot of the mix, because there's just a coolness with real stuff that you just can never get. I don't think with CGI. I'm sure it'll continue.
There is
continue to get better and better and better, but there's just still something when it's like a real thing that you're seeing that somebody's painted or whatever. There's something more tangible about it, you know, because you can always kind of tell unless you're really suspended into the moment of the movie.
Well, and even like with Star Wars, you know, original lightsabers were just all white. And so through computer graphics later, I think maybe in the 80s, if I remember right, Lucas went through and redid episode or Star Wars episode 4, New Hope. And he added color to the lightsabers.
Oh, I didn't. The original movie, it was all one color.
Yeah, they were just white. So there are places like you're saying for graphics, but then you also like, I love, if we're going to talk a little bit of Star Wars universe, because this is sci-fi theme, right? But I love for you know, like the animals or the like the puppetry or the robots. So if you I don't know if you've seen any of the Boba Fett, but the Boba Fett has one of the episodes has a bunch of robots in it, and the robots are all like actual robots, not computer graphics. Actually, one of them, it's like a rat catcher. I think he was probably CG because he was running around too much to not be. But I love that. But then there's certain places where you want the computer graphics nowadays, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There's no doubt that there are some places. And that's definitely one of the things that's really cool, is that there is such a diversity of aliens, you know. I remember being like just a shock by like the main character's you know, second, and how much makeup time that must have taken to like,
holy cow, like the lizard dude.
Yeah, his face.
That is insane.
Like how many hours I remember seeing something. I'm sure it was probably like 4 hours of makeup every day or whatever.
Yeah, at least I would guess.
That he had to put on.
I love Centauri. Is it Centauri or Centauri?
I think it's Centauri. I think
Centauri. I love how he just has this rag, right? And he just is like rubbing it on his face, and then all of a sudden he's an alien. And then he does it again. He rubs it on his face, and then all of a sudden he's a human.
Yeah.
Like he has this little portable mask that he can just like push on his face. I love that.
Yeah. It was also one of the ones that grossed me out, like the gooiness.
Yeah, I did. So in the beginning, or more towards the beginning of the movie, there was a scene that kind of stood out to me. And this was the lake scene. So they're supposed to go to the lake. He's not able to go because he feels a responsibility
to stay in the trailer park.
And help. And you know, his mom's asking him. There's, you know, he just feels defeated. There's no other choice. So he stays. And his girlfriend goes. Well, later that evening, a lot later than I think he thought, she comes back and a guy brings her back. And this guy that brings her back, it's like, oh, she says, he brought me back because it was on his way. And the Last Starfighter's like, well, it's completely out of his way. And you see this scene between the two of them that stood out to me. And you see that he's triggered. And he's poking her a little bit. He keeps kind of pushing back and dismissing or questioning her answers.
Yeah.
And you can you can see he's
loyalty.
Triggered. And in that moment, what do you think was his primary emotion? Because I kind of thought about this scene and it ended fine. Yeah, because he was poking with like some criticism and questioning. But what do you think was underneath that for him?
I would say inadequacy, right? Because it's like he's from the trailer park. This guy's got the freaking coolest truck you've ever seen. You know what I mean? But he's why would she come back on? She said she wouldn't stay so long or whatever. Why would she come back? She stayed, of course, because it's me. Like, what do I matter, right? And he doesn't say that. Right. He doesn't say that. No, he's not vulnerable at all. No.
And in this movie, it ends fine because she kind of does like this face at him and teases him a little bit, uses humor, which is actually a great tool to dispel conflict in a relationship.
And I would say too, like she's though that guy's interested in her, I think her character feels like, well, I'm a trailer park girl too. Like it's kind of like we're destined to be together, right? Like, well, I can't leave grandma or mom or whatever. Like we're meant to kind of be here and that's okay. That's our lot or whatever. So I think that she feels some of that I don't know if it's loyalty or similar shame, but I mean, the main character is such a catch, right? Like he's smart. He's like, I mean, he's staying back from the Day of the Lake to like help trailer park people with their like odd fixes because he's like this handy capable guy or whatever, right?
Yeah, and his rhetoric doesn't tell him that, right? His self rhetoric is I'm inadequate, I'm not worthy, I'm bad,
right? Which is kind of nonsense because he won he set the highest record on the
dude. Like, the whole trailer park celebrated.
Like,
I mean, that's legit. That's legit.
Like, I was like, well, I remember like not thinking anything of this when I saw this movie in the 80s, but now I'm like, this is a little unique that you've got he's about to break the record. And there's like,
and they're like so proud of him. He's so smart because he broke this record of this arcade game. I remember
it was a big deal. It was a big deal to break the record. If your name was on the top,
I never experienced that.
I got maybe like in the top 10. I feel like there was a game, dude. I lived in this crappy apartment on the top floor. My room was in the attic of this apartment on the top floor. And across the street, there was a pizza place. And this pizza place had like, I think it was Street Fighter 2. The one that had the guy with the claws. Yeah. And I totally was on like the top 5.
Yeah, the claw guy was like the Italian guy or whatever with the red sash and the black pants. I can't remember. Vega.
And I had RED, man. I was like red.
Oh man, that's awesome.
And I was like in the top 5, dude. I was like legit. So I think, come on. How can he not think he's awesome when you're in the top? Like you're the top, like, because he like flipped it too, right? Like he like went over the 999.
Yeah, I think he went over 1 million.
Yeah. So he flipped it.
Which is what triggered Centauri to come get him. I think, but this scene was really interesting to me because he's being, he's got this underlying self-rhetoric of I'm not enough. And she's coming in, and I think she's securely attached, like you're saying. She knows, she knows who he is, she knows who she is, and she doesn't get pulled into the shame. And so her response, instead of getting pulled into the shame and kind of poking back at him, is to, if I remember right, make like a little joke or something and then smile, and he starts smiling too.
And they have a little makeout session.
But I remember seeing, they do. I remember seeing that scene and just thinking, man, how often in relationships does it not go that way? And then we start poking each other and then the fight happens, right? Absolutely. And I thought that was a really neat scene. And it just stood out to me as a scene of that's a good representation of an anxiously attached or insecure attachment and a secure attachment engaging to where the conflict or the rhetoric was dispelled to some degree. I mean, it wasn't a great example because there probably would need to be a little bit more than just a joke to really comfort that, but to show that they were able to move forward with humor, because I think humor is a good
essential.
Is a good thing in a relationship.
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to cultivate humor. Your jokes that are your jokes that you make fun of each other,
the inside
that draw you together, that allow you to, because to make jokes of each other, there has to be security there, right? Which is why jokes can be so helpful, because it's like I can say these kind of horrible things ish, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that I don't actually mean you harm. You know what I mean? Like I'm not actually trying to say that you're not good or whatever, and that's what happens, right? When we fight, we cross the line, right? We say things that we know will cut the other person, that are a part of how we feel, but a lot of times aren't true. Like we know that we're overdoing it. We're conflating a point. We're saying things like you never or you always.
Yeah.
Which, no one almost ever does, is the absolutes almost never happen, right? And so it's a really nice way to protect against that. And I always encourage humor, or I actually talk deliberately about it with my couples when I'm doing EFT stuff. When it's getting heavy, I try to like make some jokes, or if I have a good rapport with them, poke a little bit in a fun way. Because levity is important when you're trying to deal with hard things, otherwise it's soul crushing and overwhelming. And humor it can be a distraction, but it can also be a part that lightens and allows us to manage it. It kind of takes me back to,
I think
Groundhog's Day,
Yeah.
Like, well, that's all right. Like you got to do whatever.
Well, I think it normalizes, right?
Yeah.
Because we get stuck in our own prison and we feel like we are individual and not like maybe anyone else. Like the things we're doing is the thing that I did or experienced is horrible, and no one would ever do that besides me. And I think humor is definitely, and I use it a lot in therapy also, where I'll laugh, I'll smile, I'll make a joke, and really just to normalize the situation and say, hey, I get it. Like we all deal with this, right?
This is such an important point, Michael, too, because, we all feel so individualized in our trauma or our emotional isolation or our failure or our rejection.
Yeah.
And look, listen, you are experiencing unique things that nobody else has experienced in the complexity of individual experience, but you're also having very universally traumatic experiences that we all, to some degree or another, somebody else can relate to. There are incredibly unique mortal experiences, but there is also excessive generalization to the point where you are not isolated, because other people absolutely can relate to or have experienced a similar type of thing. So the notion that you're just so individualized in your trauma is just not true. It's not true, because like that's why we won't trust other people. That's why we isolate from other people. It's why we get lost in
and why we self-blame and take accountability for things that aren't ours to take accountability over, right? You see that a lot in sexual assaults, in rapes, right? Where I, maybe I did something wrong, maybe it was my fault, I shouldn't have done this. If I wouldn't have done this, this wouldn't have happened.
Right. So
and taking on just such accountability and pressure upon yourself.
Michael and I are experts, and we've been doing this for both of us over 10 years, and we've heard thousands of hours and tons of different experiences, and there is an excessive amount of generalization between these individual traumas that are unique.
Sure.
But it's not. So just, I just want to don't believe that in the pain that you're experiencing, thinking you're the only one or that no one can understand. So even if it's something that you did that was horrible, that you feel horrible about something that you did legitimately do that was horrible. There's tons of people that have done legitimately horrible things. That doesn't make it okay, but people can relate. It's not, you're not.
Well, and it leads to how could anyone love me?
Right.
mentality. How, how am I worthy of anyone's love because I'm worse than all?
That's right.
And the fact of the matter is we've all got issues, right?
Not true. And
we all do things that we can learn from.
And actually, your thing that you feel so terrible about, I can promise you that there's somebody that's been through something probably in a general circle that you're walking through that would melt your ears. If you heard what they've gone through, it would melt your ears. Like you'd be like, oh, maybe it's not so bad.
or even you'd be like, well, oh, okay, I'm not alone. Someone else has experienced
hopefully that's what you do with it. I mean, just listen to, and I wish I could remember her name, I'm so sorry. There was a refugee that escaped from North Korea. It's like, if you think you've been through it,
a lot of refugee stories are powerful.
Just listen to the refugee story of this girl that made it out of North Korea and now lives in America. She went to Washington University. Is that the big one in DC? Columbia University. She got her degree.
Yeah, there's George Washington, I think, in DC, and
yeah, it was Columbia. I think she went to. But yeah, it's incredible. I mean, so that's such an important thing that almost universally our clients think they're the uniquely worse or they're uniquely alone. In this difficulty they've been through.
Yeah, and I think another part of this movie I thought was interesting that kind of talks to he's experiencing feeling like maybe he's inadequate, not enough. But another interesting point that kind of speaks to this is kind of this recurring theme where it's like single parent. So it was his mom. I don't remember any mention. Maybe there was mention of a dad. I can't remember.
No, there wasn't.
And then for the girlfriend, it was her grandma.
Yeah, it was grandma. Yeah. So it's interesting.
And I thought it was really interesting kind of how, and I was wondering if you noticed that too, how, hey, here's this theme again of a single parent and a single grandparent. At least that's what I perceived from the movie. Mm-hmm. And what do you think is the message there? Because it's a reoccurring theme we see oftentimes in these movies.
Well, I think it just speaks to, one of the more difficult childhood experiences. I mean, even though I think divorce has become quite normalized because it happens in such great numbers, it still is one of the most stressful events a child can go through. Parents divorcing and splitting will destroy and rock a youth's world more than anything. And it's so I think it speaks to like a marginalized character that is in a situation where they're coming from a place where it's single. Because isn't that like also the place with like E.T.? Like E.T. was another one. It's like a lot of these 80s movies.
Yeah, E.T. would be a fun one to do also. Well, and it's interesting because in this setting with this movie, not only is it single parent or single grandparent, but it's parentified, where the Last Starfighter is really a parentified character where he's acting in some part as a parental role. And then the girlfriend is also acting in some part as a parental role. It's really interesting because this one's not only single parent, but there's the parentification of the main character and the girlfriend within, which I wondered if you caught that too, like that. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on the parentification of their characters? Is that just to show responsibility, character, dedication? What do you think that the point of that was?
I think it speaks to some of the most dramatic difficulties of coming out of youth. When you are parentified and you're taking on responsibility sooner than maybe you're emotionally ready because life just requires it of you. You know what I mean? So I think it speaks to some of that hardship theme, which is, it is hard. It is hard to take on roles. And sometimes, or a lot of times, we just have to do that. You know what I mean? We, like that's what life offers us. And it's interesting because we are hampered and, let's say, quote unquote, traumatized by it. But it also is a part of great strength, right? Because we learn to be capable. We learn that we're able, which every kid needs to learn, right? I mean, Michael, how many times do we see situations where kids have been sheltered and have, let's say, quote unquote, secure family situations, and they're not taking on responsibility and they're completely incapable and they're riddled with anxiety, riddled with shame, that has no experience of knowing how to go fix something for a neighbor that nobody else in the in the trailer park can.
Sure.
Which is really interesting that he has like these deficiencies, but he's really not. But the deficiency is in his confidence, which is of course what the movie kind of delivers on, right? Where he shows up to the trailer park like in his starship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like this super like metaphor of like, I am the king of the universe. I'm the last.
And he lands like right there too. It's like literally in the trailer park.
I love it. It was really cool, like too, like the black guy, the store owner, which I thought was kind of cool. That like in the 80s, there was this
African American store owner.
Yeah, and he was like a supportive figure, of like when life presents an opportunity, you got to grab it.
He offered inspiration, right, and mentorship to the Last Starfighter, which is an important role in his development and ability to do what he did.
Yeah, well, and he was like talking to him too, right? Like he was going to him and like processing through, right? Yep. Like, I mean, the opportunity presented itself, and here's a person in the community, which is one of the things that's really endearing about the trailer park is, and everybody also celebrating and being there when he like rocks the best record or whatever. Yeah. Because it's like, it's this notion of what a community needs to be or can be, or what's I think in some respects, which I think is interesting that you pointed out, is missing more, right? A lot of these 80 movies have this community feel where that's, especially in the COVID world where we're so freaking isolated. It's like, where's community? You know what I mean? Like,
well, and something, and I agree. Yeah. Where's community? I think that's kind of a maybe generational also. I find people younger than me and even my age, I maybe be a little abnormal to where I just like to talk to my neighbors, but I find people my age and younger really, they don't, drive in the garage, shut the garage, and you're in the house. There's not a lot of, and that's not, I'm generalizing a little bit, but I found it interesting, this parentification concept or that was shown in this movie. And it kind of made me think a little bit about how parentified behaviors in us can almost create in some of us the maybe distancing or fear of relaxing or having fun, almost like you have to be on it all the time. And it's really funny because we were talking,
you have to grow up.
Yeah, you and I were talking about this a little bit prior. You may not realize this, but we were talking about a work meeting and sometimes how with work meetings it feels like it has to be, like our trainings have to be all training, and there can't be like fun. Fun. Yeah, fun where we're kind of camaraderie, staff, staff getting together and really just team building type exercises. And I wonder, for me in my life, how often am I feeling like I fear maybe just being a little more easygoing at times or having fun or allowing things to happen. And I wonder if that's maybe because for each of us, maybe, we had some parentification when we're earlier, which kind of creates that fear, right? Where it's like, I have to do this. I have to take care of this. Cause if I don't, who won't?
Right. Well, it's interesting, right? Because that is one of the things when you shoulder responsibility and it's about survival, you got to survive. There's no time for fun, right?
Exactly.
It's like you've got to shoulder on this. And so it brings up a really good point of being well-rounded or being in a healthy place that, there's a time to work, but isn't there a need or a place for levity and jovial and lightheartedness? And that's definitely a resilience factor of managing failure. You know what I mean? So it's a really interesting point that you bring up, and I think the necessity of it, and an interesting idea of, is it lost when we're parentified? Is that notion of being playful lost?
Yeah.
When life comes calling.
Excuse me. We've all been sick lately, right? I think that's a universal thing.
Oh my freaking gosh.
But that brings me to another point, is I want to just do a shout out to our own redhead, John Morgan, and congratulate him. He received a promotion at work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so excited for him to bring a little fun. He's going to be my boss now, and I'm excited for that.
The podcast totally
I charge.
The dynamics.
I will
of the podcast
bow
are
down.
They're going to totally change.
I charge him with a task of more fun for us at work. But I'm excited for John. I just wanted to shout out and give him a congrats, brother. Yeah,
that's
love
kind
you.
of you. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, man. I love you too. So yeah, good one. Last Starfighter. And
it's definitely worth a watch. So many of these old movies you could watch over and over. I mean, you really could do a once-a-year rotation on them.
When we watched it, well, that's why I kept saying to you, like, this is one I really wanted to watch with you because I thought it would be fun because so much of my little boy came out. It's interesting in this idea of levity and playfulness that the main character is escaping the parentification through a video game.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, good point.
To the meaningful discovery of who he is.
Yeah, that's cool.
Triumph. Isn't that really interesting?
That's cool.
Because he was going up to the store to play a game, to get away, to kind of cope or escape or whatever. But then that became the avenue to his success, right?
And it's really interesting that they have that where they allow, right? In this movie, they allow for him to play a game. But then there's the, well, I can't go and be a kid and go to the lake and have fun, right?
Right.
And but I think that's probably purposeful for the movie and the growth of the movie itself.
Sure.
But I think that's a really cool point you bring up because I didn't even make that connection. Yeah.
But now you're the savior of the universe, and you've got to rebuild the Starfleet. You're the last Starfighter.
That would be so crazy. I've always thought like, oh man, I love sci-fi. I love space. But for me, I've always thought, how scary would it be to be in space long term? Like anything could come and put a hole in your ship. You're dead. Wouldn't you just die? Yeah. So for me, it's like such a cool idea, but it's like, I don't know. I think too scary.
I've totally thought if they actually like did moon colonies or we're going to set up Mars colonies, which I, by the way, don't think is going to happen in our lifetime. I want it to, but I just don't think it's going to happen. But I would love to be like the therapist. I would love to be the mental health. I really would.
The onboard therapist.
Like, well, how can you not? Like, I don't know. Like if somebody was like, John, we've identified you as an expert and we would like you to be a part of helping maintain community and family and helping build and managing that structure. Like I'm going to say no to living on, even if I could die, it's like, I'm not going to say no to that.
Well, I think the more we develop and grow as a human race, the more that we see that mental health, emotional health is an integral part of life, right? Just like physical health is, spiritual health, mental health, and so I think there definitely would be necessity for
well, they'd be stupid. Hey, Elon, if you're serious, make sure you have some mental health professionals and
if you want to be a guest, we're open to that too.
Totally. I'm sure he wants to talk to us. Elon absolutely wants to sit down. I think he has Asperger's.
He may. I've not watched a ton of his presentations.
He's a little. And he's definitely there's a little bit of a barrier there. I mean, how can there not be? The guy is so incredibly cerebral and brilliant and interesting. He's fascinating. I would see that, but see, this is what's interesting. I would love to be a guy that interviews Elon and really like push him on the emotional stuff.
Yeah,
this is another one,
cool.
like David Goggins. I'm a huge David Goggins fan, and he talks about being hard and tough, and I'm like, dude, you don't know hard and tough. Let me push you a little bit more into your emotions, buddy. Like he always responds with like,
well, I wonder if that's how he copes, right? Because it's easier to go to the anger with himself. And I think that's a lot of how he progresses, right? Is he gets mad at himself and uses that anger to fuel himself forward
to be better, which is awesome.
Yeah. But there's definitely emotions that you could tap into there.
Yeah, there's some denial and some some skating over.
I think he'd take some work to get there.
Oh, I could.
Because he's so hardened, but
two sessions. Wouldn't even. I could get it. I could get him. See, it's hilarious too. Like I have this idea.
David Goggins could come on as a guest too if you want.
David Goggins. It's so funny. One of my life goals is to get an invite to Joe Rogan's podcast. I just think it would be so cool. And I have like a list of like 20 things that I want to have occur
Uh-huh.
during the Joe Rogan interview, like kind of like a bingo board of like things that I want to see happen, right? Like that I want. And
One
so,
day, John, maybe
day.
it'll happen. Maybe
I'm sure this podcast will be like, I need to have that redhead family therapy guy on here. But yeah, no, this was just a great movie. There's so many, there's so many cool themes and things that come out of this. But yeah, for me, it was this notion of meaning, this notion of purpose, you know, and how he discovered and connected. And interestingly enough, that took him out of the trailer park to the super world kind of experience, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, it's a good watch. It, you know, it's not long. It's like 90 minutes long or something. It's nostalgic and it's a fun
the car
builds you up
Centauri
movie. Hope.
The Centauri pop. Dude, it had the pop up doors, dude.
Yep. A DeLorean-esque vehicle.
Yeah, totally DeLorean-esque. So
thanks all. It was tons of fun.
All right. Always good to be with you.
See you on the next one.